Oh.
Okay, that's done, right?
Great, thank you. Do you want to do the welcome, Fiona?
Yeah, so I'll welcome everybody to our Audit and Risk Committee for December for East Lothian IJB, and I'll hand over to Fiona to give us the roll call.
Thank you. Before I do the roll call, I'll just read out the data protection statement. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available as a webcast via the Council's website in order to allow the public access to the democratic process in East Lothian. East Lothian Council and the NHS Lothian are data controllers under the Data Protection Act 2018. Data collected as part of the recording will be retained in accordance with the Council and NHS Lothian's policies on record retention, and the webcast of this meeting will be publicly available for up to 6 months. There are no apologies. There is one apology from Councillor Bruce today, but there is he's provided a substitute in Councillor Finlay. I'll now do the roll call of attendees. Fiona Ireland.
Present.
Elizabeth Gordon.
Present.
Lynn Jardine.
Present.
David Binney.
Present.
And Jeremy Finlay.
Present.
Thank you. And we also have Councillor McFarlane with us today.
Thank
you. Can I ask if any members have any declarations of interest? So
Fiona, in the interests of clarity, I thought that perhaps I should declare an interest in item 8 as a co-chair of a change board in my IJB capacity, but also in relation to item 9, my day job is as Deputy Director of Nursing, and I have responsibility for the complaints function in NHS Lothian.
Okay.
I don't think either should preclude me from discussions or chairing, but just for clarity.
I'll just make a note of that.
Are there any other declarations?
No. Okay. We're ready to start the business then.
Okay. So the first item are the minutes of the committee meeting held on the 19th of September. And we're looking to see if there are any omissions or inaccuracies in that minute. If there are, if anybody would want to stick their hand up. No. Okay, so we're happy with a general approval of the minute of that meeting. So in the absence of any queries, I think we've accepted the minutes, Fiona, and that'll move us on.
Right.
The matters arising from the minutes in the 19th of September, is there any item that we haven't captured on the agenda that anybody wants to raise? No. Everybody's happy, that's good. Okay, we'll keep going. That brings us to item 3 on the agenda, which is the external auditor's review of our annual accounts. And I think I'm handing over to John for that, am I?
Yes, John Boyd.
Yes, thanks Fiona, and good afternoon, members. In front of you, you have our draft external audit report for the year ended 31st of March 2023. The report's presented in draft to the committee and will be finalised following the approval and signing of the accounts due on the 14th of December at the IJB board, and we'll finalise and publish the report on the Audit Scotland website. The audit report essentially concludes our audit work for the current financial year. It covers our responsibilities in terms of the audit of the financial statements, as well as the responsibilities in terms of the wider audit areas of audit focus, covering financial management and sustainability, and vision, leadership and governance, as well as the uses of resources to improve outcomes. I was planning and just really kind of covering the key aspects of the audit, and then would welcome any questions on either the report or the audit itself. just touching firstly on the annual accounts, I'm pleased to report that we plan to issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and that they give a true and fair view and properly prepared in accordance with the code. Essentially, it's a kind of clean bill of health when it comes to the IJB annual accounts. You'll see in there we've referenced to our audit materiality. Essentially, our audit materiality is the level what we would consider to materially impact the use of the accounts, so the decision making of the user accounts, and that's set at a benchmark consistent with other sort of audits of public sector bodies, and we've updated that for the year-end accounts of 4.3 million, and we report any unadjusted errors above £215,000, and that's included within our annual report. The report itself summarises some of the key areas of focus as part of our audit work. You'll see there in page 9 of the pack just some of the significant matters arising during the course of the audits. Essentially, these were sort of presentational adjustments to the primary statements, just to ensure that they remained or prepared in accordance with the SIPFA code of practice and local authority accounting. But I'm pleased to report there were no substantial changes there to the financial statements in terms of any material impact on the unaudited accounts. In terms of our wider audit dimensions, we've included there commentary around financial management and financial sustainability. We've highlighted that financial sustainability remains a significant risk to East Lothian IJB. Some of the key pressures facing the partner bodies, particularly in terms of inflation, service demand, as well as underlying pay inflation pressures, inevitably lead to sort of difficult challenges for the IJB as the commissioning body for those services. And essentially, we've highlighted there the importance of having that strategic view and sort of medium to longer term financial plans around how services are delivered and transformed over the coming years to operate in a financially sustainable environment. I've included there commentary around vision, leadership and governance, and we've highlighted there about the medium-term planning and the conclusion of the integration scheme, which was revised in May 2023, and we've confirmed that governance arrangements operated or designed and operated effectively during the course of the year, supporting effective scrutiny, challenge and decision making. That was really the main points really I was planning to cover in the report. We've included an action plan, and these were some of the emerging points as part of our audit, which we have discussed and agreed with officers in terms of taking forward, covering financial sustainability, performance and just compliance with best value duties to ensure there's that self assessment over best value. Just finally, for me, just to pass my thanks on to David King and the rest of the finance team for their help and support during the course of the audit. There's also obviously quite a bit of transition during the course of the year, but I'm just like to pass on my thanks in terms of the preparation of the accounts and underlying records to support the audit work and allow us to finalise the report for the committee. The only other area is just really to reconfirm our audit independence, which we confirm in our audit plan and in our annual audit report, and the final audit fees were those proposed within our annual audit plan, and there was no requirement for us to uplift those during the course of the audit. But happy to take any questions either on the report itself or of the audit, either to myself or my colleague Rachel, who's the Senior Audit Manager, on the engagement of any queries or questions that you have. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Is there anything that Fiona or David want to add to what's been said there?
Can I just say that 90% of this work, I lie, 95% of this work was done by Claire Flanagan. So I just tried to come in and pick some of the bits and pieces, but thank you very much, John.
Excellent. Okay, so is there any queries or comments from committee members? Anyone? No. So I suppose the recommendations that are in this report, John, or maybe actually I'm probably pointing at them at Fiona and David in terms of the recommendations in this report. I mean, it's obviously we're well into I'm trying to work out my years now, 23, 24, and we're looking at 22, 23's finances. So savings plans for this year are obviously well underway. The one I did wonder about, Fiona, was the scenario planning around different sort of funding positions. But I'm not aware that we actually have done any of that work, and I wonder if that's maybe something we need to do in the future years, just in terms of thinking about what might happen around budgets and scenario planning, because that's one of the recommendations, and obviously it falls out last year.
So, sorry, can I come in? And yeah, no, absolutely. And we have started to have a conversation around that. I guess for us, just for this year, just around what we're doing, but then I guess future offers. And David and I, along with Liam and David Henderson and Chris King, have been having these discussions and have put out to staff around the recovery plans. You know, from the I guess the real transformation and what are we going to stop, as well as the I guess some of the lighter stuff of just the tightening up. So we are starting to have that. We have a development session for the IJB in January, and some of that will be played out, but not because we've had any firm offer. So please don't think that. It's just around, I think, feeling the pulse around just some of where the organisations are.
Yeah, I think that I got that from the recommendation here. It really was about feeling that pulse and testing it out, but it's really good to know that that'll be coming to IJB as a development session in January. That's excellent. Lynn, do you want to come in?
David, I was just going to check before the CFO says no, Fiona.
Well, he'll soon be changing his development session if it's not.
No, I absolutely agree with what Fiona said. Yes, we drafted these responses. I think that's absolutely right.
Okay, thanks. Lynn?
Yeah, I suppose related to that is the other recommendation around best value. And I suppose it's how do we balance up that kind of scenario planning with best. You kind of need to do a bit of both at the same time, don't we?
Yeah. Yep. Is there anybody? Fiona? Well, David, did you want to come in first and then Fiona?
Well, if that's okay, the Audit Scotland prepared a thing a couple of years ago, a sort of questionnaire for IJBs about best value. And actually, a previous version of this committee worked through some of that. And I was going to fish that back out and have another look at that work. But obviously, we need to build that in, as you say, Lynn, to this whole financial plan and make all these bits join together. But I think it's useful to start off with just reminding ourselves, what do we mean by best value? What is it? And how do we therefore ensure that we incorporate it? So that work is I'm certainly intending to bring some stuff back to both the IJB and the committee just to look at that whole area again.
Okay, thanks. Fiona?
No, absolutely. And I think we've got a good example of that going on just now around the provisioning work, because that is one of the, I guess, the questions around the hurdle criteria. And it actually is, maybe when we get to the development session, David King, maybe that's something around that hurdle criteria that we maybe just we probably need to develop for all of this, but absolutely picking up when just around the kind of the best way of, well, it's not just around the nice things to do, we have to do it in the kind of in the best value possible way. It might be nice to do something here and it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't reflect really for I guess a wider community or the decision and impact. So I think we've got examples, we're doing that already, and we just need to strengthen it as we go forward, because that is the big question.
That's helpful, thanks. So in terms of the external auditor's review of the annual accounts for 22-23, we're not required to do a roll call vote here, Fiona, so we just need to confirm that we're happy to note those, and this will go forward to the IJB in December along with the accounts which we're about to come on to. We all comfortable with that? Yep. Excellent. Yep. Okay, so I'll move us on to item 4, which is the 22-23 IJB annual accounts. And David King, I think we're over to you for that, and we're back to the main papers as they were. Okay.
Yeah, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong. My recollection of the process is that the IJB produces a draft set of accounts at the end of June. That then goes into the audit process. John and his team have a look at them and make the Audit and Risk Committee is Committee of Governance of the board. So they make a recommendation, they write the report, and what we then do is take it to this committee so the committee can review it and give it a decent consideration. This next then report says that what we're asking the committee to do is first of all, the annual accounts are attached, so you can actually see what the final document looks like. And secondly, we're asking the committee to review the independent auditor's review. Too much reviewing going on there. To note and support probably the independent auditor's review. And then having done that, then the committee recommends the approval of the annual accounts to the IJB. And at that point in time, my understanding is the annual accounts are approved. Now, if I'm just a second before I forget, John, that document then should that not include your final draft opinion? No, the annual accounts don't include your final draft opinion, but the paper to the IJB might want to include your final draft opinion, or should we just put the draft on it?
Yeah, so our audit opinions are to confuse matters, we have an independent auditor's opinion which is included within your financial statements, and I'll sign that essentially when the accounts are signed. So right. Once the accounts are signed, the way the process works is we undertake our audit work, and our report helps provide the members assurance that the audit is essentially complete and gives you the comfort around that the audit has not identified any material errors, material misstatements, and given the members the assurance to approve the accounts for signing. Once the accounts are signed, we then independently sign the accounts, so that essentially the accounts prepared by the IJB and signed by the IJB have then been subject to final audit.
Thank you for that. I know there's slight distraction, but the IJB is on the 14th and the clock continues to tick. So, I mean, that is basically what this paper then tries to join these various bits up and then ask the committee for its support, saying that to the IJB, we have sat down and had this discussion, and therefore this matter doesn't have to spend too much of the IJB's time. And
to be fair, I think we had an earlier draft of this prior to, so I think we've had a fair discussion on this previously, so I'm hopeful that we're not going to pick up anything too untoward this time round, but I'll open it up to committee members. I think, David, you're going to get off the hook. No questions, and we're comfortable now that we've got the independent audit, external audit review as well to sit alongside. I think we're probably fairly comfortable. Okay, and bearing in mind this is 22-23's audit accounts, and at that point we were that 10.1 million overspent, but we look forward to this year's accounts with even more glee, perhaps, as things get trickier. Okay. So in terms of the annual accounts, we have had these here before. We do need to do a roll call, Fiona, and what we're essentially saying is that we approve these going forward to the IJB to be approved. Is that the fairest way of putting that?
Yep, that's right. I'll do the roll call now. Councillor Finlay.
Agree.
Elizabeth Gordon.
Agreed.
Fiona Ireland.
Agreed.
And Councillor Jordan.
Agreed.
Thank you. That's the recommendations agreed unanimously.
There's definitely merit in having good discussion about them at the draft stage. Excellent. Okay, we'll move us on now. Is Duncan's with us. We talked a few meetings ago about looking at the committee's skills and knowledge, and Duncan undertook to do a survey of our, or an assessment of our skills and knowledge, and he's going to just give us a verbal update today.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, very recently got back the skills and knowledge assessment from all of the members. Thank you very much to David to getting his skills and knowledge assessment through. I know you had some difficulties in doing that, but you've managed to get it through to me, and I've been able to include it. Apologies for not having a paper, but it's all come back very quickly before the committee, so only really able to complete everything Monday this week. So I've now got that assessment. It fairly clearly highlights 4 areas where I think committee members feel that they collectively, I think, feel that they have areas where they'd like more knowledge, or it would be useful to bolster knowledge. Says Councillor Finlay, many thanks for your return as well. And there's 1 or 2 areas in there where you will have scored slightly lower because you haven't necessarily had that IJB induction, and you've come in very late on. So there'll be bits and pieces that we'll need to pick up with you independently, and I will send you some items. I know you've asked, and I'm afraid I haven't got around to it yet, but I will send you some details, and I'm sure others will send you things on as well for your inclusion. The 4 areas that it highlighted were counter fraud, governance, and I think particularly around the annual governance statement, best value, and I think given the findings in the external audit report there, that's understandable, and partnerships and collaborations also came out as being an area where there's potentially a need for more skills and training for the committee members. He says, along with that, we were doing a assessment of the against the SIP for Audit and Governance committee statements. There's still a few members to come back to me with that assessment, and we may go through that earlier in the new year with the chair and come back with a report, possibly to the March committee on overall in respect of that. In relation to those 4 areas, I think I've got suggestions for the committee, and I'd be very interested to hear your views if you're comfortable with these. Counter fraud, I can understand being an area that you may have limited knowledge on, because most of the fraud risks lies within the partner organisations, both in the council and in the NHS, both of which have counter fraud teams that look at those elements. And there's a question of whether a briefing at some point put into the work plan for this committee around the operation of those fraud teams would assist members in their understanding there. In relation to the annual governance statement, particularly and around governance, you'll find the annual governance statement is actually part of the accounts that are being presented today, and you'll find it on pages 31 to 35 of your packs. It was also presented as part of the draft accounts. However, I think there may be benefit in actually bringing that as a separate reporting paper rather than including it in the accounts, so that the committee can get a greater understanding of how the annual governance statement is put together. And I think that one is an approach taken in a number of other IJBs, where the annual governance statement will be brought separately as a paper and then included within the accounts when it comes to finalisation. And I'm happy to take that on board as an approach to give more guidance and advice in respect of that. One of the things that we've picked up from, and certainly the chair picked up from the SIPFA guidance for audit committees, is that we haven't had a private meeting with internal audit and external audit, and I'm wondering whether and he says, I'm looking at my external audit colleagues and I haven't mentioned this to them, so that if we have such a meeting, it might be useful to have a discussion around best value as part of that meeting. And I'm seeing John nod his head, so that that seems like a sensible approach to take that forward in terms of knowledge. Partnerships and collaborations. I'm probably interested in members' views as to what more that you'd be looking at in there. Obviously, the IJB is almost a prime example of one very large partnership and collaboration between two significant partners, but there are also partners that come off the back of that. And I think there's probably a need for a little bit more understanding with the committee as to elements that they'd like to understand more, whether that's the interaction between the NHS and the council, or the health and social care partnership, or whether there's other elements of partnerships and collaborations that members would be keen to get further skills and knowledge on. And I will leave that there and open it up for questions from.
Okay, thanks, Duncan, and I appreciate that we were asked to get them in by about a week ago, and most of us were probably right at the tail end there. But I think it's helpful to have that analysis of what's come out so far. So I'll pass on to Elizabeth first.
Thanks, Duncan. I would welcome some extra guidance or training in the areas that you have mentioned. One thing, I sit on the audit committee for the Edinburgh IJB as well, and something we did a few months ago that was actually really helpful was we had basically essentially a private session with the members of the committee, with internal and external auditors, where we basically got a chance to ask questions, and I found that really valuable. Basically, we weren't trying to cover anything else. It was just ask anything you like, no matter how daft. And I think that was really beneficial. So that'd be something that I think would be really helpful for this committee. In terms of how the IJB functions, one of the things that I think I find really hard, and I think it goes for the Edinburgh IJB and the East Lothian IJB, is how the council's financial decision making works and how that impacts on the IJB. Because I think when you're a board member for NHS Lothian, you become quite familiar with how their financial cycle works and so on, and understanding when the key decisions are. I think that's hard to understand when you're not a councillor when you come into the IJB, and the impact that can have on the finances of the IJB. So that's something that I'd be interested in, but that's maybe just me. Thanks. That's all I've got to add just now. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think there's probably a vice versa in there as well, isn't there? That if you're not in the NHS system, then you would want to understand that. So I think there's maybe a two-way street there. Duncan, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, just briefly on that, and again, David might be absolutely appalled with this suggestion, but one of the recommendations that we actually have that I know is now sitting with David, or he's inherited it from Claire, for the Mid Lothian IJB, is looking at a timetable, particularly coming up in relation to the budget setting for the IJB, that would then encompass, I think, both sides in relation to the NHS and the council side. And I don't know whether members would find that useful in terms of just setting out that kind of time scale for bringing it forward, so that people that are on people that are more used to the council side can understand how the NHS works, and I think from the NHS side understand how the council works, because I think they do operate very different systems to give you that kind of element.
So I think we'll take the comments from Jeremy and from Lynn, and then perhaps we can come up with a way of working this forwards into the next year's calendar. But Jeremy?
Yes, thank you. I think Duncan's already mentioned this, but from my point of view as a very new boy, I think an information on the relationship between the council and the NHS would be useful for me, perhaps as a one-on-one, to get a better, broader understanding of the bigger issues before I dive down into the more detailed issues. So I think it would help me understand the detail if I knew the broad brushstrokes as well.
Yeah, I'm sure as part of your induction onto the IJB, there will be input on that. I know that will all be formalised, won't it, at the committee meeting following the IJB meeting coming up. In terms of positions on audit and risk, that will also be part of that IJB meeting. But yeah, I think part of the induction is really important around the different organisations and how the relationships between them to create the partnership, and the role of the IJB within that, which is obviously the entity sitting out to the side. Lynn.
Yeah, just in terms of a couple of things, I think I would certainly welcome enhancement of learning, if not starting from scratch learning on many of the areas that Duncan's highlighted. I think in particular, two areas, the in private discussions, I think I've certainly benefited from that within the council, being able to have a very full and frank discussion around how I find my role there. Has been incredibly helpful in helping me understand my role, as well as being able to identify issues that need looked at. And I think everyone's agreed that the ability to understand better from each partner organisation's perspective how the budget's set, how performance is overseen, and because they do them so probably maybe not significantly differently, but there are different ways of doing it across both of them. So understanding that would certainly make a big difference to me. Thank you.
Okay. So Duncan, going forward with this, I mean, we don't want to turn this into an industry in terms of you now having to report on what we submitted. So I wonder if what we should be doing is we will have 4 meetings next year as the Audit and Risk Committee. I'm going to be a bit brave here and say generally we don't take up all of the time that's aligned to them. And I wonder if we should perhaps have a development session bolted on to each one, which is prior to, I would suggest, the actual meeting, which allows us to take those 4 topics and cover them across the year at the pertinent point for that, coming into play in the timetable. Would that seem? I don't know what others think, but it just strikes me we have these 4 meetings. We don't use all of the time that's allocated to them, and we could actually have some development time within that. I've got a thumbs up from Lynn, so.
That would seem like a very sensible idea, Fiona. If we schedule in some time with myself and possibly with David as well, just to schedule in that across the year, possibly early in the new year, and then we can come with that as a paper to the next committee as a plan.
Yep. Are people comfortable with that as a way of addressing the fact that we've identified some learning needs and therefore we need to take them forward? Excellent. Okay, that's super. Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward and prove that we will have time normally to do some development stuff. David, I'm coming to you around the IJB risk register.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. The IJB, as you know, maintains a risk register. And what we do is we review it every quarter, in actual fact, before the IJB meetings. Go through all the risks, say, what did we say before, what actions need to be taken, what needs to be updated, what do we think kind of style. That is then put into a paper, and what the paper does, it has the risk register attached to it. And then in the body of the paper, we note down any changes we've made. And then, as I think we agreed previously, we note down those risk items that have a risk rating of higher than 20. And 20 is a simple multiplier of likelihood and impact, I think. So that's basically what the paper says. The thing that comes leaping off, well, as far as I'm concerned, the thing that comes leaping off the page is we've increased the risk in the issue of financial sustainability because we are aware of the huge challenges we've had in the current financial year. I'm not going to say the years, Fiona, because I don't know which one it is either. But the 24-25 is clearly not going to get any better. And that now is the most, in my head at least, the most significant risk to the IJB. It's also a very significant risk, of course, to the partners. And the partners, of course, who deliver the strategy of the IJB they are also going to be hugely challenged. So that risk, if you like, goes up and down the page because it will also impact upon the partner's ability to provide the resources to deliver the strategy. So I think that's the kind of thing that's very, very anxious making, and that was the kind of thing I wanted to highlight. I guess you guys will have read the report. It's not terribly long, and the risks themselves are the risks to the operation of the IJB, and I'm sure you've discussed that previously. So perhaps, Fiona, if it's okay, I should just open it up for questions.
Yep, just one point. I think what we've got here is the full risk register, isn't it, David, for the IJB?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
what we had been doing at previous meetings, just to make this a little bit simpler, was we were bringing highs and very highs, so that we weren't having to go through those that were sitting at medium and such like so all the time. I think we will probably want to do that once a year, but we don't need to do it every time. But I can't remember when we last. So we'll have a look back and see how often we need to bring everything, but at least once a year. And then no, it's just because we otherwise, this is when we do get into the discussion and we can be here for the rest of the afternoon. However, we have been keeping a good tight eye on this. So are there any queries or comments on the risk register? Elizabeth?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask about the risk 5486 about the East Lothian Council Finance Department. And I note that the position of Principal Accountant has been recruited to. I just wondered, is this going to change anything from our point of view in terms of the financial reporting, or are we still going to be left with quarterly reporting? Because I'm aware from our previous discussions that there was quite a concern about how that would impact, particularly over the winter, with a failure to be able to keep an eye on budgets. So I'd be interested to hear about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think Fiona Wilson might be about to pick that one up.
Yes. So so they have recruited to Principal Accountant, Liam MacDonald. The council finance team are still in business continuity. Having said that, David Henderson and Liam MacDonald have been excellent around providing monthly reporting. So they have been doing it and supporting us. Now, whether that's formally or informally, I don't know, but they are doing it, David, aren't they, in response? We've not had an issue actually since we flagged it with David and Liam. But I suppose I just want to recognise that department still is in business continuity. So I think relationships have improved, reporting has improved, and it's helped just having Liam. And Liam's been right up the middle, as has David, with our finance discussions along with Chris King. So I suspect Sarah as Director of Finance will say, well, this is the minimum I can give you, and anything else is for her eyes is a bonus, and we are getting that bonus that we have had that, haven't we, David King? I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, no, I was here, as colleagues will remember, a year or so ago, and certainly the quality, I don't mean quality in the sense that it was bad before, but it is more easy to understand now. And we got I had a very, very good briefing session with Liam. We just sat and talked about various bits and pieces. I've certainly seen a month 6 report and a month 5 report and a month 6 report. I don't actually see a month 7 report yet, but certainly we're getting more intelligence than we were in the past. So I take the point. It may be, I mean, Sarah's team may be still under a lot of pressure, but it has improved.
Yep. Okay, well, that's good to hear. Jeremy?
Yes, thank you. On 5220, the democratic pressures, under the column controls in place, it's the third one says a commission cap Gemini to access future demand on care at home services. I presume you mean assess rather than access, but I may be wrong on that. But I mean, either way, what's the timescale on that?
Fiona, are you aware?
Yeah, so I suppose I would need to just come back, Councillor Finlay, and clarify the timescale on that. But Capgemini have been working with us and have done that assessment, so they have got the findings to that, and we did present that at the IJB. But that future work, I think, is for us to decide. But I'll just get an update on that from the Care at Home Change Board.
Okay, that's helpful.
Thank you.
Can I just jump us back Well, I mean, in fact, in any of them, but jump us back to the finance one, just in terms of, are we still comfortable with the rating that's on that? Are you still holding that rating at high? That it's not changed significantly enough yet to bring that down yet, Fiona?
Yeah, I think we still have to have that as high because it's still in resilience within our partner and the council, and that's
Yep.
we need to reflect that in ours. And while it has improved, I guess it's the consistency and also just reflecting the risk to us.
No, I just thought it was worth
position.
us just checking that out. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Any others that anybody wants to pick up on? The financial resources being insufficient remains very high at 20, and we know the position last year and we know the position in the current year. Okay. The impact of the National Care Service proposals, I think, are still so unknown to us that we wouldn't want to be shifting that. And the operational resources, again, remains high, and that's in line with everything that we've been discussing about the budgets anyhow. Okay, so in terms of the risk register, the recommendations are for noting. So this is, let me jump back up. Sorry. Recommendations are to note the current risks, note the updates made since the last meeting, and consider if any further risks. So I haven't done that bit. Is there anything else that anybody feels ought to be on the IJB risk register from what they've heard from, in terms of what we're doing and what you've heard from the IJB and the accounts as they stand? No. Okay. So are we content to note and accept those recommendations? Yep, I'm getting some nods. Excellent. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the Health and Social Care Partnership Risk Register. Now, we look at this on an annual basis, simply to understand it's not within our jurisdiction to do anything with this risk register, really, but simply to understand the risks that are aligned to the partnership. So these are the much more operational risks, whereas we've been looking at the risks previously around the strategic ability of the IJB to do its job. So I'll hand over to Fiona. You okay?
Yeah, I'm just getting it. My computer's crashed.
Oh no.
The screen. Apologies. David, do you have it up? Sorry, I'm just.
Do you want me to move on and come back?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll move on and we'll come back to the risk.
Sorry, Fiona. Sorry, Chair. I'm having trouble with this computer as well, but it's just popped back up. The paper just says actually, excuse me, what you said at the introduction to this, that we bring this operational register to the committee every year just to let them see the kind of big things going on out there. And if there is anything that kind of leaps off the operational register that's not picked up on the IJB's register, consider it. Now, it's just really for information, and the recommendation is just consider the HSCP risk register to satisfy themselves. So no operational risks in this register that may become strategic risks to the IJB. So it's really just, as you said, Fiona, a review that's to allow people just to look through that and just see what that operational process, see what is going on, if you like, or what the risks are in the operational delivery. A lot of the stuff will be the same, you know, the ability of recruiting folk and financial constraints, but there'll be lots of other things out there as well. Sorry, Fiona, about that.
Okay. So were there any issues that anyone wanted to pick up specifically, bearing in mind the purpose of this being here? Although it's all very interesting, and I'm sure we would all love to discuss the operations of it. That's not our role in this place. But is there anything that anybody has identified that they think does impact on the strategic deliveries? No, everybody's comfortable. I mean, I think a lot of the you can see the relationship between the two registers, and I think as long as we can see that relationship, then it's probably in the right place. If we were to see anything that we thought ought to be on our IJB risk register, this is the opportunity to highlight that. Okay. Well, I'm going to.
No,
Lynn, on you go.
Sorry, Fiona. I'm just conscious that I'm not necessarily picking anything up on sort of net zero sustainability issues in terms of operational stuff. I wonder, obviously we've got the new hospital, but there's other older facilities as well. I was just wondering if there was anything picked up on that.
Not sure that would be in the risk register, but I'm happy to hand it over.
I'm happy to answer that. I suppose I'm uncertain because I wasn't expecting that. So I guess we've not picked that up in the risk register around that, and that's something we can consider. I guess there's the wider issue around that kind of infrastructure of buildings, assets, etc., that we are picking up elsewhere. I guess just around some of our provisioning work, but not necessarily recognising that at this stage as a risk. I guess the capital or the lack of capital funding will be a risk coming forward, but that's I guess is noted by both partner organisations, and that's I guess where the responsibility lies around that. But it's definitely, sorry, a good question actually, and maybe something we should be considering.
I appreciate it is slightly out of left field, but I suppose there are sort of climate issues that might impact on workforce, etc. as well, and we might want to just sort of figure in there as well.
It might be about looking at
property.
It might be about looking at the existing ones with through that lens. That might be the other way to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, again, this is brought for noting, and we don't need to do a roll call, so we can move on as long as everybody's comfortable that we've had a look for this year. Okay, that moves us then on to the internal audit report on change board governance. So back to Duncan.
Many thanks, Chair. This report is to bring to the committee the recent audit that we've completed in change board governance as part of the 23-24 internal audit plan. We had an audit of change board governance down. However, when we came to have a look at it, the General Manager for Planning and Performance had slightly got there in ahead of us and had completed a structure and governance review of change boards, which was then reported to the East Lothian Strategic Planning Group in October 23. Identified weaknesses in the framework for change boards. Therefore, our internal audit very much is written in the basis that it supports all of those recommendations in place, and the fact that a review was going on actually bodes very well for the governance of the IJB, in that it was looking at these things already and was in there preparing them. We have, however, made 3 recommendations as part of this review. One is to ensure that, and they've all been agreed by management, so management have agreed to produce an action plan for change boards, which will clearly outline both the responsible officer and the target date for each of the recommendations that were in the strategic planning group report, of which there were 36, but we're highlighting 11 of the key recommendations being the ones that need to be made through specifically. Which you'll find on page 73 of your pack, the 11 key ones that are in there. Management have also agreed to produce a combined change board project delivery plan, which will incorporate the implementation of the recommendations and will be reviewed by the strategic planning group, ideally on an annual basis going forward, and that to be in place by August 24 next year. And management have also agreed, and this was one that was kind of off the audit report, to ensure that change boards complete an annual review of how they communicate with service users and stakeholders, in conjunction with the other recommendations made as part of that report. And again, that will be reported back in August 24. I was happy to take any questions on that report. Okay,
thanks. As you say, it was in, well, almost slightly behind in parallel with the review that was happening anyhow. Okay, are there any questions for Duncan? I've got a slightly more general one, and I might be being a bit offbeat, but I'm acutely aware that we bring the IJB audit reports here, but I'm not aware that we then have a role in following up on the recommendations being completed. Or perhaps we do and I haven't noticed it, which is pretty bad.
Yeah, Fiona, we bring the update on the recommendations being implemented on an annual basis, so that will come in June with an recommendations updated.
That's grand. I maybe missed a June meeting or something, but I hadn't clocked that that's when they were coming, and I suddenly thought I don't know that we do see them, but that's fine as long as they're coming in June. Good. Okay. Any other queries? I mean, I think this one was fairly straightforward, given that it was part of a wider review that we were doing anyhow. Okay, super. And I'm move on to the last one, which is an internal audit in NHS Lothian. And as I say, this is actually a service that I'm involved in, so I don't want any difficult questions, please.
I will tread carefully then, Fiona, with my he says, as part of my role as the Chief Internal Auditor for the IJB, I do then review the audit reports going to each of the partner bodies, and will then bring forward to the IJB any of the reports that I think are worthy of consideration. The recent, August 23 report by the NHS Lothian team in relation to complaints handling within the NHS gave a conclusion of limited assurance, and very specifically held out that there was no assurance in that there was no feedback loop for lessons learned, and a lack of assurance that teams are acting on recommendations from complaints as a result of relevant improvements are not identified and shared across the wider organisation where relevant. He says, however, and I thought this was worth bringing to the attention of the IJB, and any reliance placed on complaints information, there may be elements slightly missing over a particular period. However, I would say that I believe in June 23 that the NHS implemented a new complaints process that is now dealing with all of these issues that have been identified within the internal audit report, and now there is now regular reporting of complaints, and they're looking on a quarterly basis to review the themes, is my understanding, Fiona. That's now in place, so there is a balance to bringing this to the IJB, but again, more than happy to take any questions, or indeed I suspect Fiona may be able to answer more of the questions than I am, but I'm happy to take any questions that I can answer.
So I think it is fair to say that there was a new process put in 2023. I think there's still work to be done, Duncan, around the bit that you described around that closing the loop, but I'll take the questions, and between us we'll field them. Elizabeth.
Thanks. The bit I was most concerned about was the lack of assurance regarding lessons being learned from complaints, and I just wondered if you feel there's been any progress in that since the report was published. Thanks.
My understanding is that there is progress being made, and I think Fiona's probably not there on the head. There's still further progress to be made in respect of that and closing that loop. But yes, that was the bit that concerned me, and I thought was worth raising with the audit committee.
Okay, I'll take Jeremy's, and then we'll try and tie it up, shall we?
Yes, thanks. Just a general question, perhaps from again, I'm new to this, but are complaints from employees, if that's the right word, treated on the same basis as complaints from members of the public? And are these, and is this assessment of no assurance across the board, or is it mainly related to the members of the public?
Duncan, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, well, my understanding of that is I'll let you deal with the complaints and the employees, because I think you've probably got a greater understanding of that. My understanding is this is predominantly in relation to complaints from members of the public, that this element of no assurance is there. I also just recognizing that actually it's probably a statement I should have made at the beginning of this. Obviously, the implementation of all of the recommendations as part of this report set operationally with the NHS, and not at that strategic level with the IJB. However, obviously, where there's a no assurance in place, that may have impacts on the IJB in relation to the strategic plan.
So right, let's just, I'm changing my hat. The no assurance in terms of the feedback loop, I think, Elizabeth, as you say, that is a concern. And what the issue here is that there is no record of the action plan being held against the complaint in the complaint system. That's so. There may well be changes made to process, there may well be things done to improve a situation, but it is not written down as an action in an action plan, and it is not currently shared across the 4 partnerships, the acute division and RIAS, where that would be appropriate, because often learning in one relation to one complaint in one area would have applicability across other areas. So there's 2 elements to this as I see it. One is the actual construction of an action plan that says, as a consequence of this complaint and as a consequence of the findings from the investigation, this is what we are going to do, and then a mechanism to share that with other people. And that requirement around the action plan is being aligned with the responsible person for commissioning the complaint and the complaints investigation in the first place, to assure that the actions that are being taken are proportionate and relevant to the complaint. So that work is underway. The second bit about the sharing across the organisation is aligned to a piece of work that we're doing with an external, trying to think the best word to describe this lady. She's a former director of quality in another board, and we're working with her to create a shared learning forum where exactly that will happen across the organisation. So that's the work that's happening to try and resolve that. Jeremy, in response to yours, no. So if an employee is a patient and makes a complaint, then it would be dealt with this way. This is complaints from patients and their immediate family and advocates. Employee complaints in terms of employee behaviours. So you might get attitude, and you won't get the complaint from the employee coming in here if it's about another employee or about a behaviour or whatever. That would be dealt with through an ER process. So this is really around complaints from patients and their advocates into patient care related elements.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, right, so I'll change my hat back again. So in terms of this internal audit, I can assure, well, I'll keep it on actually, I can assure you there's a very robust plan that will be reporting into audit and risk in NHS Lothian in terms of the progress on that one. We're not required to take a vote or anything on this one, but we are just required to note it. And I think it is of interest, and it may be one that Fiona will want to bring back in terms of, you know, just an update at a future date in terms of the actions that we've taken and whether they've made a difference. Just to, given the level of lack of assurance that we're holding here, you might just want to feed back in, say, 6 months or so, in the hope that we'll have delivered against those actions. Okay. Are we all comfortable with that? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. That's got us through all of the business that we had today, and I think that kind of indicates that we would have time to have some development time at these sessions, which is good. And so I think we're closing the meeting, Fiona. Do we turn off our cameras and we get David to stop the recording?
Yeah.
Done? No, it's